live from Belgium. Joris is a talented, actually, I'm not even sure what you would describe yourself because you're working in so many diverse ways, helping teams interact better and get value faster. Somebody might call you an agile coach, but I think that's selling you short in a lot of regards. Maybe you want to give me a good framing on that.
Well, I consider myself a coach, an agile coach, but mostly I try to simplify it. So let's stick with the word facilitation. I try to make it easy for other people to work better together.
And I'm Brian Graham. So I've been working in tech for more than a decade now and all kinds of technical leadership roles. And I work with Joris on lots of team related interaction stuff, helping build better organizations and get things flowing smoothly. And we met through being partners in the Team Topologies Advocacy Network. So really happy to be here with Joris. And today we're going to be discussing team boundaries and interfaces. When I think about team boundaries, I think the typical thing that comes to my mind is what I see a lot of organizations do, which is they say, I have a team, they draw a box, they put some names in the box and they say, that's a team. And then they give it, they give this team some kind of territory and say, you're responsible for these products or these services and away you go, please go do some Jira tickets or something like this. I'm working with a lot of tech orgs and startups in this space. So that's kind of my experience on what typically people think about. And I think this thinking runs into some issues. What do you think about team boundaries and interfaces?
Well, I think there's more confusion that I'm seeing everywhere. So they don't have enough boundary. People are talking a lot. They tend to listen to each other, but they don't really grasp the same meaning of what has been said or what has been agreed. And if they don't put clarity and no boundaries, then they more start talking next to each other instead of to each other. So I would be a fan of more formalizing clarity and boundaries for that matter, but it can be bottom up as well. So it's not that it has to be put on them top down specifically.
Yeah, I love the bottom up approach because it feels so empowering. The challenge I run into is when I see companies say we're going to do a bottom up org, clarification project, like just everybody put your docs into Confluence or Notion or whatever. We don't get results and we get a lot of documentation, but we don't get clarity. Something's missing in the equation. Maybe we all need to use Confluence. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think there's never enough documentation, but it doesn't matter which tool you would use. It's more the agreement, how you want to put things to document it, but also how you want to retrieve it, or how does another person who's not in the speciality of what you are doing can easily find the things relevant for them to use, for to read. And I think that's mostly a cultural issue. So it's not about the tool for me. The challenges that I see is that most people don't even know, like, do we really have to do this sort of documentation? What for? There's too little unity between teams that they say like, well, they are not doing it, so why would we do it? Put all the effort in the big organizational view. So there is a lot of work to be done still.
Yeah. So I had this interesting experience with one company where bottom up did a lot of work and then top down wanted the organizational work. And there was we were swimming in documentations. Exactly, like there can never be enough documentation, but I think there's a question of what kind of documentation is it? And it's not necessarily about having more. It's, yeah, exactly what you kind of talked about here is it has to fulfill a certain purpose. And I think this purposeful documentation is the
Uh-huh.
challenge.
Yeah.
A lot of teams, when I just look at, I jump into a normal engagement or I think of the teams I've worked for in the past, they have that documentation. I can open up the wiki and it says like, this is our team. Here's who's in our team. These are the products that we own. And here's like a whole bunch of technical documentation. Like that's not rare to find, but for some reason it doesn't work. And so as an experiment, what I did is I said, let's take all these 20 teams, pull out the products, put it into a list. And then I return that list to, I pull all the team leads together and I pull the product managers together and I say, this is a unified list of all of your products in your company. Can you pick out the ones that you own? And something like 70% of the list was unaccounted for.
Uh-huh.
So when it's not on that page, they don't know what they own. So I think there's something about how they're using the tool, not so much about is it documented. So
Well, I would not specifically focus on the tool again, because it's maybe even nice written in words, but if it's not lived, then again, people can say that person owns it, but if that person doesn't confirm or lives up to the standards of what does it mean owning, I think my experience went even so far to the quality of, let's say, 20 teams who needed to work together. Every team had their own definition of done, their own ambitious or less ambitious quality level. And to present it to each other was already a challenge because they knew that there were different maturities. But also, what I consider is asking them, like, if we want to release and integrate everything together, quality should be aligned as well. So, how could we find a baseline of agreed quality? In this case, the definition of done for the whole group. And that was surrounded with a lot of resistance of putting the effort in. Are we focused on our own team focus, or do we really are part of a bigger picture? And that has to be, to my opinion, to deal a lot with the leadership around it. And if they don't stand up to make sure that everybody knows that they are part of the bigger picture, then the initiative is being pushed instead of being pulled. And that's exactly what the bottom-up approach would look like. That people pull their self into the bigger picture instead of someone tells them to do that.
yeah, this is such an interesting, it's a fine line to walk because you have the teams should have autonomy and scope and purpose and be able to ship things to their own quality and standards. But you do have that tension of, are we meeting a collective standard as well? And so you risk either siloing the teams and not having enough uniformity between them and not enough connection between them to interoperate. And you also risk having, on the other side, no clear division between those teams. So the boundary between the teams kind of disappear if they all adopt one global standard and can't come up with their own things locally. So where's the trade-off line? How do we negotiate this?
My experience mostly goes to the reality that there are mostly silos within the company and in the culture. So it's not a risk of getting even more siloed. So it's a given fact that people struggle with, like, how do we get out of the silo? One of the, like, unifying standards would have a trade-off, but you still can make your own unique definition specifically on quality, but you can find the common grounds if you work together with others. So that's probably then a compromise or a trade-off. But you can
Yeah.
still, for yourself, make your own high standards and agreements. So it doesn't have to be an either or, it can be a both and more.
Yeah, the silo stuff is a routine challenge. And I just saw this article you wrote, which is from debate to design. And I think it's really interesting take on how to get out of the silo challenges that we typically have, like stop debating, start designing. And I just found it to be an awesome take. Can you expand on like how do you make that work and why is that the right way? Like what brought you to that?
Yeah, well, I think the tagline of the story is mostly how you want to break silos? Do you want to talk about it, or do you really want to design a connection into the structure of how you work? Because mostly teams have so many people who have still different opinions, and if you have to work together with other teams who have again so many different opinions, you can keep on having the talks and the talks without real change. So my thesis would be like, okay, you make a point, there's a burning platform, this is not working optimal. How can we change it a little bit? By drafting it out, designing, experimenting, trying to see what does it take to do a change, like what is the behavior change of the people, and not only nice on paper, not only in a tool, but how are they using the tools? For example, if you would notice that two teams have to work together and there are always tensions between them, but also many things that are not so clear. So they waste a lot of time up and off extra communication, which should not be needed. There's frustration and so on. If they would have a more formal portal of communicate what is relevant to the expectation of the other teams. They would make it easy for the other teams. They would facilitate a conversation of where do we find what we need? When can you communicate with us? Who are we? What can we help you with? How do you ask help and things like that? What's the SLA and all these things? Mostly then the other team would be inclined to say like, okay, we will follow your rules and boundaries to connect with you in the best way forward. And we
Yeah.
need to know this instead of sending emails to individuals. It would be much more an open portal that all the stakeholders can find with one click of a button if they would use the Team API, for example. I think the biggest premise to break silos is to have more people finding the unity, and within the unity of that collaboration in a big organization, they still want to have enough autonomy to move fast forward. How to do that is to communicate very clearly and to know how to interact with all the stakeholders. To make
Yeah.
that easy, if you formalize a structure and you put it into a tool and a process, people can still change the process along the way, but they hold themselves accountable to improve this communication channel. And that's the whole point.
Funny to me because what you're describing should be bread and butter to a lot of product engineering teams, but
Mhm.
they're not doing it. They're in that mode that I described earlier at the start of our conversation of just dump data facts into the wiki and hope
Mhm.
it solves itself. What you're talking about is the traditional way to build a product, right? You treat your documentation as a product. You say, I have customers, people consume my documentation. They want to know who I am. They want to know
Mhm.
what I'm doing. I
Mhm.
might have some internal relevant documents like our internal ways of working, but there's a external side as well where we talk about, things other teams need to know to work with us effectively, or things the leadership team needs to know about us to help guide, the organization and steer us through the different challenges we have, or make sure they don't overload us with too much work or too little work or all these other traditional leadership challenges. But you're framing it, I see it as a design challenge, not a documentation challenge. And you have customers that you put first, your internal customers
Mhm.
who are using it. And if you do that in collaboration with your customer, you end up in a better state than simply in your silo dumping out data points and saying, this is what I have. And you build that understanding so you don't run into that problem, which I identified at the start, which was like, you put people's documentation back in front of them and they don't know what belongs to them. So it touches on all the things like embedding that into the culture, that awareness, that knowledge. It's a very clever way to go about things.
Well, I didn't invent it. I'm mostly using specific techniques or patterns of collaboration. But on the other hand, if I see that teams or individual team members have a sort of resistance in knowing why they are doing what they are doing, it should be on the table, clear for everybody that there is a better way of collaborating, which doesn't have to be too much communication. Too much collaboration is also giving so many distractions. You have the email problem, but also the Slack and the other WhatsApp communications. So if people are aware that they want to optimize the way of working and working together, even between teams, they should find a way to come to an agreement. Like if we use this standard, then we can improve. So if you don't measure, if you don't standardize, you probably cannot improve. So if they want to improve, they can start formalizing and take the initiative of saying like, this is how we would like other teams to approach us. This is how we would like to approach other teams and other stakeholders. So we manage the expectation in two directions. And if it's designed, you can improve the design, you can interact, involve other people. You can say like, are you my customer? Am I paying respect to the short time that you have to find your way into our business? Well, we will work together to find the best way forward.
You said something at the start there, like I agree with everything you said, but you said something that will be controversial to some people, which is possibly that there's too much, or collaboration is something that you don't want to oversubscribe on because the traditional management quick one-liner is everybody should collaborate with everybody. And
Yeah, well, maybe in the beginning of the agile days, it was focused on one team. People really need to understand what they were doing. But if you come into a bigger organizational setting where many people have so many uh, different contexts, you cannot expect people to have enough space to really dive into everything. So they need to focus as well. And to do that, you need clear guidelines, boundaries, guardrails. And I think working together means that you can also make it easy for other people to not get distracted. So if you make it very clear who you are, what's relevant for other people to know, how to contact you, when, what you are delivering, make it very easy, like release notes or things like that, you can definitely help the organization in their focus to what's really important.
yeah, this focus is important. I think that's the early startup stuff. Like you need everyone to work together when you have those two pizza box teams where everyone fits around a table. That makes perfect sense. But exactly as you described, you add as you add people, the lines of communication, they grow and grow and grow at such a rate that you have 20 teams, you add one team, that's 21 new connections
Uh-huh.
just on the team level. How many targets of communication, like how many channels of communication do you have to keep track of in your own brain? It's out of control. And with the collaboration work, it's not free work, right? It makes sense to make sure you don't have unstructured collaboration. It doesn't mean one of the challenges I've seen people raise just in our space is they don't like the prospect of restricting lines of communication or things like this. They're afraid that structuring communication means locking down and deeply controlling communication. It means you're not allowed to go talk to that other team because we have an org design that says you can't go do that. I don't think that's what that means. It just means we have a flow of value that goes through these teams in a specific way. So we're not maxing out everybody's mental capacity on how many people do you have to interact with. I once worked in a team where I had an unknown number of stakeholders. I felt like there was 21 plus people I had to talk to any week of the day. I could receive a message from any random part of the organization until we started reining that in, saying, okay, we're going to start filtering those conversations through certain leads. We're going to have somebody manage that. We're going to have certain channels for certain topics. And we got it down to two lines of communication coming into the team. And the amount of work we were able to get done was enormous because we
Uh-huh.
weren't chasing all these different stakeholders at random. Yeah.
Yeah, I think most people are allergic to overheads. So if there is unclarity, most people try to go to a comfort zone, which is their comfort zone. But if it's contradicting what other people need, it's probably not a good thing. So if you have new people on board and their onboarding is to find out whatever is the way you're working, you don't make it easy for them if there's too much complexity. So if you can simplify at least the communication, that would be a bigger help for getting fast up to speed, having less delays, slower delivery, and all these things. So I don't think that people would oppose to faster delivery, faster clarity. The only thing is that you have to engage with everybody to make sure that they follow the agreed protocol then. And that's a
Yeah.
way of culture. So they make the culture. It's not that you oppose now it's doing everybody has to do things like this, but mostly try to facilitate the conversation so they make an agreement like from now on we're gonna at this channel and we take the best out of it. And if not, we evaluate it and improve it along the way.
So I think
Okay.
this is the core thesis of stop debating, start designing. Is when we come to these organizational things, we end up debating for a long time, like what's the ideal structure? And we almost enter this adversarial mode where I have this design, you have that design. And I've seen all kinds of shenanigans play out where one side is working heavily on a new plan and the other side's got a shadow plan and they dump it on the organization at the last minute. And they get into conflict, and all kinds of these fun little tricks. But
Mhm.
they're all adversarial games, and you never end up with a really functioning organization.
Yeah, I don't mind that there is conflict or that people disagree. The only thing that you have to be in favor for is to make sure that people feel involved in the conversation. And if the decision making ends up in there's going to be one tool or there's going to be this amount of structures, that's another compartment of governance, but you still have to involve them. And then probably they will make the best out of it. If you don't, then they will probably not even use the tools as you expect everybody to say yes and then do yes. Now, probably there's no alignment if you enter it like that. So decision making adds up in a designing process, but that's because it's a participatory event and not just a design in the ivory tower like this is what everybody's now going to do.
I want to bring it back to the silos topic really quickly, because the design thing also gets challenged. I've heard a lot of people out there saying like we shouldn't have such heavy org design. We should have, floating swarms or a foam or a fuzz of teams that's constantly changing. And it's an interesting call. Like in principle, like yes, of course, and everybody is capable of everything, but maybe not at the same time. There's an interesting thing there. What we talk often about breaking down silos. And I'm wondering if breaking down silos is generating some of the organizational overhead chaos, right? So you used to have structure and you used to have, predictable lines of communication and collaboration, and you erase the walls, and now what? So I'm wondering about that framing, and you hinted at some stuff in your article. I'm wondering if you can add some perspective on that.
Well, I think my article mostly focused on the idea of if you know that there are silos within an organization and the teams consider themselves as we work within our sphere of interest and we have less interest in what the other people are doing, then that makes it very difficult to collaborate. Finally, if you have the need for the intrinsic need of every human being of interacting with each other, that contradicts in like, yeah, we don't want to interact, but still we need to interact. Well, if you have explicit agreements, you can exemplify them within an artifact or in a tool, in a process, then people will probably find it easy to adapt in a new way of working where they see an opportunity instead of a negative challenge for them. So
Mm.
I suppose if people see the whole system instead of their own little bubble, if it is being helped by a shared understanding and governance of we work together, then their whole autonomy can thrive and working together with their stakeholders can result in more success than if it would stay into silo and miscommunication.
Yeah. So it's not so much about erasing boundaries, it's about that design work of making sure you understand where you fit in and how it enables flow.
Mhm.
Would you say that's the direction, or
Yeah, I would mostly try to ask people, put yourself in the shoes of your stakeholders. If you can give them a gift of this is your documentation, what is relevant for them, and how to use it as easy as possible, get like the mirror that they are sort of giving you a sparring consult, and then you work it out. But you have to find a way to not duplicate the effort all the time. So if that's the attitude you have, like we work for our customers, even if it's an internal customer, we need to find the best way to communicate. And I think a team API can help there.
yeah, team APIs are a fantastic way to package that up. So we've talked about so many different things today. One of my favorite points here was stop debating and start designing. And it's not stop talking about it, it's stop being adversarial and start being generative towards your organizational design and seeing it as a shared design challenge. I think that's one of my favorite points today. Did you have any key points that you really enjoyed from
Well,
our conversation?
yeah. If you use a slogan, stop debating, start designing, I would definitely try to empower people to think of the implementation of it and not the debate and the arguments, because you want to translate it in something very practical, which you can use the next day. as a whole organization, as a few teams, and so on, and not a dispute which lingers on and brings frustration. So the designing part has to be very visual, that people can interact, they can understand, and they can find their way putting that into practice instead of a debate where there's always misunderstandings of I'm right, you're wrong. I see it a little bit different, the nuances and things like that. So I like focus on the visual and the practical side of it.
So if I gave you a magic wand tomorrow and you could just make one thing happen, just one thing happen in your next organization or, a typical organization, what
Hmm.
would it be and what are you going to wish for?
Well, if I would come to a new organization and I would observe the idea of silo and the price people pay for that, and they are not aware or they are a little bit indifferent, they grow into it. My preference would be that they would feel the pain, which they are not yet so much aware of. And if you can measure that, if you can visualize that, and you can find a counter solution for that, like a team API, and then you can measure how much the difference would pay off, that would bring for so many people an aha, like, okay, now that we know this, we don't go back to where we used to be. Only for the silo thinking and the waste of time and the frustrations and the unclarity and things like that. So that's already a big positive improvement, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to echo you on that with my financial take is I wish all that overhead costs, like if the silo and the communication overhead cost was exposed on a balance sheet or an income statement somewhere. Right now all that stuff's hidden away, right? You'll never see it, but if it was exposed and people understood how much money they're just throwing into the garbage can, how much potential development and market differentiation build out they're just completely throwing away every quarter, um, they would be completely in shock. Just the
Yeah.
amount of money going into the trash
Mhm.
because of communication overhead, because teams don't know on a tactical day-to-day level, like who's
Mhm.
got this thing, who's doing that, do I interact with them? And then you get into the flow problems of this is
Well,
my silo.
yeah, the challenge there is it's mostly not their money. So what I would find a hidden source of motivation is that it's their time. And they can be motivated if you improve the process by improving their way how they use their time. And then they can measure or compare how we used to do this and that and how we could not do this and that because it was not so clear. Now that it is getting more and more clear, we have so much more time. We have the clarity on faster decision making, more aligned agreement, better focus, better results, and so on. So that's then the positive side of the financial sword which is hanging over their heads, but that doesn't affect them that much. Their own time would probably affect them more because it will demotivate them if they don't find it, if they are lost in email threads and things like that. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's where that expression, "the buck stops here," is somebody please think of the shareholders. This is really eating into the profits.
mm,
So
yeah. Well, to wrap it up, what did you take away in one sentence out of this conversation?
make sure that your team APIs or your team documentation is bespokely built in collaboration with your inter-team customers. So other customers are other teams inside of your company, and you should really design your documentation of what you're doing by figuring out who you interact with and making sure it's appropriate for them. And it's high quality and low touch once it's out there. This is the big thing, not a data dump of these are people on our team. These are things we work on. Like it might look the same, but it's actually very different when you act differently on these things.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about yourself?
Well, you mentioned somewhere that people like a generative culture where people can contribute but also reap the benefits. And if you have too much like a top down structured organization with focus on compliance, probably people are not doing that. So to turn that ship around, you can more enable people to work together in the way that works best, evaluate it, visualize it, and step by step get the motivation back to keep on improving the process. So that's for me also
Yeah.
a generative approach.
Well, awesome. So thanks so much, Joris. And I think we're going to have a lot more conversations about these team interactions, team boundaries. So I look forward to our next chat.
Okay, talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.